All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. It is your favorite Jackson, and Nestle, unfortunately, is still out. So we have another guest star today. First, I'll introduce our wonderful and beautiful Peter, our host and co-host of this show. Uh, Thank you for joining me as always.
I think that
We
might be
cannot
the
hear you.
first time someone has called me beautiful, but I'll
I
take
don't
it.
believe
I'll,
that.
I'll take it.
There's no way. That
No,
is impossible, Peter. Um, and then also joining us today is the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Reed of How Creationism Taught Me Real Science.
Boy, doesn't that sound like a misleading title still?
Oh, I don't know about that. I, well, for anyone who's not aware, I want to first tell the story of how I came across your channel, and then what happened following coming across your channel, because you very much changed the course of my YouTube career with your channel. Um, so I was sitting in, I know exactly where I was. I remember where I was that day. I was sitting in the what do you call it, the archive at the LSU Baton Rouge Museum of Zoology, and I was doing this very tedious menial work of cataloging all the different specimens that they have that they had just inherited from Tulane University. So Baton Rouge is the capital of Louisiana. Tulane is from New Orleans, for anyone who's not aware, which is, I believe, actually, I don't know which one's bigger. They're both pretty big cities for Louisiana. Not for like Las Vegas or New York or something like that. They're smaller compared to those. But I'm listening to different videos, just putting them on. And I saw this one video, and I start listening to it, and I got very angry all of a sudden because it starts off with evolutionists think that whatever the coelacanth is the missing link between fish and tetrapods. They thought that it would crawl on the seafloor, but it doesn't. I'm listening to this, I'm like, what? No, that's ridiculous. And I start crafting my response in the comments, and then the intro hits, and then he goes, the first coelacanth specimen was found in 19 whatever it was, like 42 whatever, by Marjorie Courtney Latimer. And he starts going into it. I'm listening. I'm like, yeah, this is all true. And then you start saying the fossil record of the coelacanth goes back to this time, and I went, oh no, never mind. And I started hitting the backspace. I went,
Yeah,
oh no.
I'm a Poe. What can I tell you?
I really appreciate what you do with that intro. The term that has now come into common parlance is steelman. You steelman their claims, the creationist claims, and then you get into addressing their claims. You don't present a straw man of their claims, you present a steel man of it. So you put it in their own terms and then combat it on their own terms. And I think that's great. That's the way to do it. And then once I realized that, like, oh no, he's not a creationist, and I watched that video, and then I watched more of your videos, and then you did one of your, at the end of each season, I suppose, you would do like an errata and shout outs, and you shouted out a then little known channel called Apologia, and I went over and I checked out his channel, and he happened to have a guest on shortly after I checked out his channel, because I watched it. I was like, okay, this seems cool. I'll subscribe to him. And that guest he had on was also a little known guy named RJ Downard. And then shortly thereafter, I talked to RJ, and then, or I talked to both Paul and RJ, and then we, wrote the rocks for their volume 1. So you were a major link in that transitional series to getting both volumes of the rocks were there.
Oh, that's a great story, and you're right. I do Steelman, but there was no term as far as when I started. I don't believe that term even existed yet.
Yeah.
But that is the attempt, is to represent it accurately, but also representing it accurately. My target audience while not being my actual main demographic, my target audience is people that wouldn't watch it if they thought it was going to destroy their arguments to begin with. So the whole point of that beginning was, we present the argument. I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to refute them. I'm just going to tell you about them, and then I'm going to go ahead and just destroy them afterward. I will tell you this. I have no doubt you would have run into Apologia whether or not you'd seen my channel. Now, maybe you might not have seen the RJ Downard show, but you definitely would have run into him. He's blown up, obviously, and I've sort of stagnated because I don't do any marketing at all. But that was an interesting time. I was very prolific, and I appreciate that you watched it. I enjoy your channel. I'm not always commenting, but I mean, there was a time where I just was constantly, if you saw something, I immediately put it to the top of my list and would start watching.
And I totally understand that. I lurk on a lot of channels. I'll just play them in the background as I'm doing stuff, and so I'll never comment. They have no idea, if I watch their channel or not. But I'm there, watching watching stuff. So yeah, I do that a lot. I get it. Most of the time, I'll play videos and stuff as I'm like driving or doing work or whatever. So I'm listening, but I'm just not directly engaging with whatever. The only time I really engage with videos, the only people who know I watch their videos are the Creationists, because they can come, here and watch us tear them apart. So, yeah.
Interesting. And we're going to be taking on a Creationist video today, I understand?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have one question, if I may. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I thought the title of the show was brilliant, because I think the title of that show would draw in Creationists to go and watch your videos. So can you tell us what the responses were? Did you have any responses of Creationists who then said, okay, you've convinced me about a certain topic?
Okay, well, the idea for that name was specifically to keep it vague. I mean, I am literally... The reality is, I started watching Kent Hovind like decades ago, and
that's why I'm here.
I decided, and so I watched his videos, and then I decided, well, I didn't know for sure one way or another. I'm not saying I was leaning towards evolution, but boy, did I find Kent Hovind a little irritating. So I would decide to start fact checking a lot of his claims, and then I went, wow, he's not even close to right. And then the more I looked, and I just, my gosh, look at all this. And so it's not a lie. Creationism did, in fact, teach me real science, but it's because I actually did that extra thing of doing your research. And when you actually go to the scientific papers, obviously you know that Kent Hovind stuff is not going to be borne out. And then as far as the reactions that I've gotten, I have never gotten anybody say you've convinced me. What I have said is that because of my show, they have gone to something else and they've done more research, and then they've come around because they've done that. It's never, because in reality, it's never going to be just one argument that's going to convince somebody. I'll even get a lot of creationists telling me they agree with me on this video and they agree with me on these arguments, and then they'll tell me all the other stuff that they do. And then the most fun ones are the people that they say, well, yeah, that's true, and then they bring up something completely different. I'll talk about biology, and then they'll say, oh yeah, well, what about this? And they're talking about astronomy. Or I'll talk about astronomy, and they'll bring up genetic entropy. And that's the most fun, where they agree with you, but here's something entirely different. Yeah. And but never can I say that anybody's just said, well, you've convinced me. And I don't think that would be what happened is they started checking out the science for themselves. And basically, isn't that what you want? Because when I do shows, and especially when I do shows where we talk about scientific topics, I always encourage them, go do your own research. Do not believe a creationist website, but check out their sources.
check out the sources in the scientific community and see what's what. And I think if that is what you got from your shows, then you basically got what you needed to get out of it, I think.
That was actually, well, it wasn't exactly the idea I had in the beginning. I think in some weird way I have a sadistic thing to mess with people's heads. I used to be a stand-up comic, and so I enjoy just a little bit of stirring up the dirt every once in a while. But as time went by, especially after the first season, because I didn't include references. I didn't include any links to my references. I just would show the paper. And after a while, people started asking me, especially by the end of the first season, can you go ahead and link to your references? And I thought, well, okay, I can do that. And I started doing that. And then that the whole people started doing their own research actually started happening, or at least that's when they started commenting. But you're right in that. And that isn't the victory I wanted, but I'm quite happy with that victory. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That is a brilliant. Other people will do their research, and as you already, as Jackson mentioned, at the end of every season, I would take the time to thank people who called me out on and stopped me and told me I was wrong about something. Yeah, why not? You know, I'm trying to be honest. You're honest. I'm going to go ahead and shout you out for that. Only one creationist ever corrected me. And I said, okay, you know what? You've done a great job. I'm going to go ahead and shout you out. He goes, no, don't you even mention my name on your show. And so I shouted him out, but only the fact that he was a creationist. Unfortunately, I didn't get to give his name.
Okay. Interesting.
Cool. Yeah. I didn't know that you used to be a stand-up comedian, just so you're the second person in this community I know who's a stand-up comedian. I recently started working with Natalia Reagan. If you haven't seen her, feel free to check her out.
I will. Natalia Reagan?
Yes.
The anti-creationist community is a bunch of stand-up comics and the Dutch.
Yes.
I can't explain it, but it's true.
Yeah, I've actually spent time in the Netherlands not too long ago, actually. Natalia Reagan, is it spelled like Ronald Reagan?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to look her up, and I'll watch her later on today.
She's a stand-up comedian, actress, writer, anthropologist, primatologist, and a very fun person to be around, to be honest.
On her photo, her icon photo, her avatar photo, is her with a banana in her ear. And all I can think about is that Boffo punchline when somebody says, hey, you've got a banana in your ear. What? You've got a banana in your ear. What? I said, you've got a banana in your ear. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I have a banana in my ear.
Yeah.
It's an old joke from the 70s, and that's what I think of. I'm looking at that picture right now.
That's pretty good. I do, what I appreciate about all your videos is just how information dense they are. When you go through these topics, regardless of what it is, whether it's you're just looking at the evolution of the whale. I say just looking at it's a lot of topics. Whether you're looking at the evolution of whales or dinosaurs evolving into birds or specified complexity or information or genetic entropy, you have these just they're so information dense. It's pretty amazing. Well, I strive for that kind of stuff in my videos. So
that comes from me not knowing completely what I'm talking about, and so having to go figure out what I'm talking about. Because I can argue this, and then when they say, "Well, we performed this," well, what is that? So then I have to go look it up. I think there was the solid phase method for producing like nucleotides and things like that. When I saw that mentioned, I said, what is this solid phase something? And I had to go look that up. And then I got the entire history of solid phase. And that led to me doing an episode on biomolecules that, I guess was pretty information dense. But that was actually the only time I've ever addressed any of James Tour's arguments. And I'm not saying it's because of me, but he has changed the argument. where it used to be, we don't know how to make any of these four, I think it's nucleotides, carbohydrates, and
the macromolecules.
Yeah, he said, we don't know how to make any of them. And so my video showed that, we can make them. And his response is now, or his, not, I don't think it was me that caused this, but his argument is now, you can't make those in an abiogenic context or non-biological context. You can only do it with, like a prebiotic context. That's what he's saying. You can't do these in a prebiotic context. And I can't disagree with him right now. Still doesn't make creationism the answer.
I mean, don't we though? Like, we have nucleotides from asteroids, right? Like Ryugu has uracil that has been found on it. So that's...
I'm not talking about the chemicals anymore. He's talking about life itself or cells.
Oh well, yeah.
Autocatalysis.
Sure. I mean, in that case, sure, I guess. But it's like that's so a field of just like making macromolecules or even complex macromolecules. So you got to keep. You got like, okay, the bar is here now. Okay, well, we got to raise it up here. Now we got to raise it up here, or moving the goalposts or whatever, or whack-a-mole. It's you. Yeah, sure, you took out this one argument, but I have this other argument over here. Okay, well, sure, you took that one out, but I have this other argument over here, and it's you just have to keep going through them one by one. It's Dapper and I, Dapper Dinosaur.
Of course.
We were talking with this kid several weeks ago, however long ago that was, and he was like, okay, well, my definition of information is this. We said, okay, so by your definition, this is the information, or this organism has more information than humans do. Well, no, that's not my definition of information. I want to change it to this. Okay, all right, so with this definition, this organism has more information than humans. Well, no, I don't want that definition. And so it's just, you just keep going one thing after another. You can't ever really, it's like trying to nail Jell-O is the analogy I always hear people make.
It's like a continuous moving the goalpost. And the thing is, the questions are valid. They're good. How do you do this? That's a great question to ask. And then you can learn more from it. I can tell you that my view on this argument has changed, because I know there's questions I'll never be able to answer. And there are things that probably won't ever get an answer. But what I can do is something in the real world with everything that I'm learning from the science here. And that's really that's where my focus has changed in terms of my argumentation. I'm less interested in trying to prove that evolution is true. I'm more trying to prove that, well, if you assume this, you can do things like cure disease or create new technology. And I think I don't know if I covered some of the new technology that was created in the specified complexity. Yes, I did. Actually, the evolutionary algorithms. I talked about that.
With the cochlear implant or whatever it was. They mentioned how the computer developed better systems than what the humans had come up with, and like some of them would be so like novel. Some of these systems that the evolutionary algorithm would come up with that the human engineers couldn't determine whether or not like what it had done exactly to get here, and like they wouldn't know what parts would be more susceptible to like error or whatever. And like that blows my mind. That the computer is just with these simple parameters. It's just very slightly tweak this, and if it works, keep it. If it doesn't work, toss it out. And they just kind of keep going with that, and it comes up with these insanely complex systems. Like that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, and that's really been my focus now. Is when I'm arguing with people, because I still, even though I've been kind of on a hiatus from the videos for my own professional life, I still have to chat with people and get out some of my arguments and see what they are. Hopefully, some of that will lead to maybe when I get a vacation or something in the near future, I'll be able to crank out a few episodes again. That'll be fun. Your
turn towards practical application came with a debate that you did with a Muslim apologist. No, actually, you both did with a Muslim apologist. The same guy. a couple years ago.
Finding Truth, I think his name, or
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ahmed.
How was that? How was that? Was that fun or?
It was frustrating for me. Wait, weren't you one of the moderators in that?
Mm-hmm,
yeah,
it sure was.
Okay,
and then I debated him later.
What was frustrating to me is the point was I was showing that it's useful. I'm not trying to prove that it's true. And his response was, well, obviously that's wrong because it's impossible. And I thought, well, but here it is. They did this. They used the implications of common descent to, and this is actually something you had talked to me about Leishmania, and all that. And I'd done the research on that, Govinda Visvesara, and all the work that he did. And in the end, it became you and Steve talking with him, trying to correct his bad science. And I'm like, it doesn't matter whether his science is right. You still can't do anything with creationism. You can still heal people. You can still develop new technology with evolution. And that was my feeling at the end of it. And the reactions that I got from it was, you needed Steve and Jackson to rescue you. Like, no, I needed them to rescue him because he was off topic completely.
Yes, you did awesome in that debate. You did a great job. When I had my debate later with Finding Truth, it was supposed to be on the Cambrian explosion.
Yeah.
We never talked about the Cambrian explosion in that debate. He went immediately to what is information, and then we just spent the entire time talking about what does information mean, and we never talked about the Cambrian. So, he could never stay on task. He was never very good at it. And honestly, I haven't seen him around since. Like, I've seen literally no Finding Truth videos since then. I'm not saying he's not making them. I just haven't seen them.
I had him on my channel not too long ago, debating an ex-Muslim a couple of times. I think a couple of times, but yeah, he's gone very silent.
Yeah. Okay.
I think probably he wasn't getting the responses he wanted because the thing was weird about his channel because it was only maybe when I debated him, I think his channel was less than a year old and he had something like 50,000 subscribers all of a sudden. But when you watch the videos, when you looked at the viewership for his videos, virtually all of them were like 30, 40 people were watching.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking, how is he getting all these subscribers? Who's subscribing to this? And there's maybe I tried to look for maybe that killer video because sometimes people have that one killer video,
like 100,000 views or something. Yeah,
and I didn't really find it.
Well, so it's not hard to get subscribers. They're only a few dollars for I think 100 or 1,000 subscribers. I mean, they don't watch you, but you'll have subscribers.
That's just not cool. That isn't cool at all.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, you did great in that debate. You did very well. He just wasn't very good at debating, and then after my debate with him, he went on to argue with Nestling and Steve for another couple of hours or so. But it just there's no getting through to him. There just wasn't any. Okay, well, shall we watch this video?
I can't wait.
I have not. I just want you to know I never watch these things in advance more than 20 seconds just to be like, is this worth even responding to? Because there are sometimes these creationist videos will just be so boring that I'm like, there's no point in responding. So I'm curious to see it. I know that in the description says they talk about dinosaur soft tissue and human chimp relatedness. So
let's see.
All right, we ready?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Howdy, everybody. Okay, so we were just in the green room, and I was telling Pamela a little bit about how I've been on this slow journey towards young Earth creationism. So basically, I want to give Pamela my the way I always viewed it was I always thought evolution was nonsense. So it just seemed nonsensical to me that all life could come from a primordial sludge, because how could survival of the fittest choose genetics that aren't there yet? If it's just this primordial sludge, how can it choose the gene for an eye if an eye doesn't exist yet?
Wait, pause. So, in one sense, I mean, I guess he's kind of right. I mean, how could natural selection choose a gene for an eye if genes don't exist yet? I mean, yeah, that's true.
It's like he thinks that the very first life had these big bugging eyes or something for some reason.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, now this guy, he says it's been a slow trip to creationism, but I never understood evolution in the first place. So was it really a slow trip, or was it, a steep decline?
Maybe he believed in creationism, but he thought that the world was really, really old, and now he's just slowly making that journey down to to young Earth creationism. That'd be an interesting story, but he's used so many very common creationist arguments, and it seems like he's put them all into one argument.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic.
How the most creationists I talk to will tell me that they don't know anything about evolution. The only thing they know, it's wrong, and that always confuses me.
Well,
true.
I don't know how it works, but it was wrong.
What's the thing Aaron said, that lady who told him, I know that I know that I know that I know. Yeah, that's true. So very many are saying this, many such cases.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Keep going.
Dude, evolution is pretty ridiculous. And
it's so ridiculous.
Despite believing in adaptation, right? Like you can see that creatures do adapt to their environment and maybe even change over time, but that's very different from, species jumping and things like that. So
I hate when species jump.
We had Hugh Owen on about a month or two ago, and I had never really thought about young Earth creation. So I'm kind of taking
just
everybody
ended
on
it with
this
I have
journey
never
of
thought.
my conversion to young Earth creation, because over the past few years, I've realized that the people that tell you that a man in a dress is a woman, and the people that told me that the vaccine was totally safe and effective, and the people that tell me cow farts are heating the globe, and the people that won't tell me that life begins at conception. These are the people that are telling me.
Okay, so he's very far right, like culture war narrative guy. In addition, I mean, the Venn diagram of like far right, anti-climate change, anti-evolution, like those Venn diagrams. That's like almost one circle, not quite. It's not quite as one circle, but it's pretty close.
I've said many times that paranoid conspiracy theories are like Lay's potato chips. I bet you can't have just one.
True. There's this idea called monological thinking, which is like when people latch onto one conspiracy, they latch onto a bunch of them. Like I don't think I've ever met a person who holds just one conspiracy, like who's just like, no, it's just the vaccines are bad, but no, the climate is definitely heating, and also evolution is definitely true. Like I've never met that person. Maybe they exist. I've just never met that person. They conspiracies tend to run in groups, as you said.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he's obviously like very transphobic. He's an anti-vaxxer. That's cool. The funny thing is about that one is I've argued with a lot of people on Twitter, which you shouldn't do. It's very stupid. But that's one of the claims that you see a lot. And I can't wait to like do the pseudoscience lecture with my students, because that's one of the topics I get to discuss. And I'm like, oh boy. Because I'll see people post on Twitter things like oh, the CDC has been lying to us for years, and you go, oh, lying about what? And they're like, oh well, we all know masks don't work now, not according to all these meta-analyses on mask effectiveness. Okay, well, it was the vaccine. The vaccine doesn't work, not according to all these meta-analyses on RNA vaccines. Oh well, it's social distancing. Like, the social distancing one gets me, because I don't think literally anyone will argue that if I sneeze on you and I'm 2 feet from you, more of my snot's going to get on you than if you stand 10 feet away from me. Like, who's arguing that? It's ridiculous.
They just wanted to be around each other. I mean, I could see that. It was really inconvenient, but it's called herd immunity. We needed it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And so but yeah, so I've had those arguments with people where they say like, oh, Pfizer had to settle this $2 billion lawsuit, and it's like you look into the details of it and you go, this has nothing to do with vaccines. This is about them misbranding, I guess you might say, or incorrectly advertising these like pain relievers, and they did incorrectly do that, and so they were justifiably sued for that, and they had to pay out $2 billion. Like that is how that works. If you lie about a drug, but like there have been no court cases to date in which anybody has sued, or I guess successfully sued. Maybe there's probably some people who tried for whatever reason. There are no successful cases where anyone tried like suing Pfizer or Moderna or whatever for like, oh, vaccines killed my family. Like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. The thing is, the people that we probably talked to about that, they tend to be so America centric that they don't realize, this affected the whole world, and the rest of the world didn't use our vaccines. They also came up with their own vaccines. China has, I think, 4 or 7 of them. Russia has quite a few. There's not just one. There's dozens of different vaccines, and they all work in different kinds of effectiveness. This is a really gigantic conspiracy theory, because it's not just American scientists. It's somehow they're keeping in touch with the scientists across the pond and sneakily coming up with a way to make a new vaccine to, I don't know, do something to us. I'm not sure.
Yeah. They want to turn us into cyborgs, which would be cool, and I'm down for it. I'm here for it, government. You can turn me into a cyborg. That's fine. But like, hasn't happened yet. Sadly, I still have to go to work. It's very lame.
When I was a kid, we had the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman on TV, and that'd be kind of cool to be the and suddenly go fast and stuff. Have the eye to see a mile away. That'd be, that would be, well, now the RoboCop was a little too much for me. I wouldn't want that, but Steve Austin, astronaut, that was brilliant.
It's just so there's actually a really good book, and I've showed it very many times on this show. It is titled The War on Science by Sean Otto. If you haven't read it, I cannot recommend that book enough. Funny enough, we had PZ on, PZ Myers last week, and I mentioned it to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I know Sean Otto, which I thought was kind of funny. Cool. But yes, super good book. One of the best like books on the history of science I've ever read. It's got a very good overview of like climate change denialism, on anti-vaxxers, and all that sort of stuff. Great book. So
I'm writing that down.
Okay. All right. Onward.
That we evolved from monkeys. So my distrust in them is very big, but I also don't want to just become skeptical simply because I don't trust these people. So Pamela, you were telling me
what? That's actually fair.
You actually did buy the evolution story for a very long time though, right?
Yeah, I have to keep in mind that this guy doesn't even trust the Pope, because the Pope has said that evolution is a thing and we need to accept it. And now we've got Catholics denying basically what is their doctrine. Am I mistaken? Isn't anything the Pope says doctrine?
Well, there's actually, so the funny thing is you'll get, I love, and you can always tell who it is. You'll get people who self-identify as trad cats on Twitter, and then the Pope will say literally anything, and they'll go, the Pope can't do this. Aren't you a trad cath? The Pope is your leader. He can do whatever the frick he wants. What do you mean? Yes,
Jackson, but his eminence misspoke. That's usually the rebuttal. I mean,
it's like these are people who have very clearly been raised Protestant, and then they were like, being a trad cath sounds cool, and then anything traditionally Catholic happens, and they go, I don't like that. Well, you're not a trad cath. I don't know what to tell you.
I think people just don't like change. People just don't like to see things change. They like things the way they are. Yeah. You watch the next Facebook update. people are going to lose their minds. The next time, next time YouTube makes a change, I'm going to hear every creator talk about how they messed up everything now. They screwed up the algorithm. It happens in everything. It's kind of refreshing to see that there are trad cats who would question the Pope. That's actually kind of neat to me, but it really is just human nature.
No, you're absolutely right. I agree with that. Yeah, I do remember watching like live streams years ago where YouTube would change something very slightly, and they go, "Oh, can't believe YouTube would do that," or Twitter, or whatever. So
and we used to use. I actually got a few videos still on my channel that are from the days when they had response videos, where you could, if somebody put out a video, you could make a video that is a response to that video. And that was another way you can market yourself, and you'd see a lot of wars, and it'd be very easy to follow the debate because when this has been responded to by this person, and you can see 5 or 6 people that have responded to that. It was a really fun way to do things.
That is a pretty neat idea because, for instance, now, if you're trying to, we were talking about the Dr. Dan versus Casey Luskin. It's like if you, unless and Dr. Dan usually does this, he will recap this, but they've had their debate, and then Luskin's written a number of articles about him, and then he's done like a podcast, and Dr. Dan's done a bunch of different videos, and so it's it can be hard to keep track. Wait, was this before this, or was this after this? Was he responding to this article or this one? So yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, but so that would be cool. I'd actually, I'd be down for that. So
not anymore.
We should bring that back.
It would be cool.
We should become trad YouTubers. Bring back the old days of YouTube.
Trad YouTubers.
Okay, we can keep going.
Yeah, I did. So I actually, I tell people sometimes that I became an evolutionist because of a creationist biology textbook I used in high school. It was an Abeka textbook. It was printed by a Protestant group. And the arguments that they presented against evolution, I really, I felt like they committed a lot of logical fallacies in the course of them, especially some making fun of the evolutionists in a way that I just felt like was, if this is their best argument, then evolution must be true. And so I concluded that in high school, and then I went on to college and I studied cell and molecular biology in my undergrad, and then I got a master's in the same, and just kind of accepted that this was the way that things came to be, and that really we did have some sort of solid scientific evidence for it. And it wasn't until
I do want to point out that despite the fact that she said her reason cell and molecular, you don't necessarily have to take an evolutionary class to do, or any class in evolution to get a bachelor's in the subject. For one, you may or may not for your master's. It's going to depend on what school you go. But you may not in evolution. It might be the case that if you are molecular, you take a class where the actual evolution and usually ever on, unless obviously you're gonna have to take basic biology class.
Jackson, I don't know if it's just me, but you're breaking up a bit.
About the very basics. Oh, am I still breaking up, or am I good now?
It's unclear to me.
Oh, okay. Can everybody hear me in the chat? Do I sound okay, or do I sound bad? You may, aside from the very basic biology classes you might take as an intro in your freshman or sophomore years, you may not ever have to take an actual class that's on evolution. If you're cell and molecular, maybe she did, maybe she didn't, I have no idea. But you don't necessarily have to. And even if you do, because I've been in these classes, I am roboting a bit.
Yeah,
do I sound better?
I've had an issue with StreamYard for a couple of days now, so it might be on my end. I don't know, but it seems to be fixed now.
It's better now?
Yeah.
Okay, Alex Markle says, okay, I gotcha. But even if you take a class where they talk about evolution, you may not necessarily go through the evidence for evolution, or you may not necessarily go through all the, the nitty gritty of it. So just saying, I went to college and evolution seems solid, but now she's a creationist. She may not actually have any background in evolution. It may be all very anatomy, physiology, biochem focused, where you really don't have to interact with evolution a lot in those fields. So, like,
well, that's a very common argument from creationists that I'm getting a lot, is the argument that you don't need to know evolution to be a doctor. Because I'll talk about the real world applications, and somebody said, well, you don't. I've looked. You look at any college course, you don't need to have evolution to become a doctor. And I'm like, well, yeah, because if you want to be a private practice, you're just going to do all the treatments that somebody else came up with. You're not inventing treatments in your private practice unless you want to get sued. So the people that are developing those treatments, they're often using evolution to figure out how to develop a new treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they might have to keep up with like the literature or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for a private practice person, yeah. But yeah, if you want to be a researcher, you are going to need to know, because you're going to need to, if you're studying the infections and stuff, bacteria evolve, viruses evolve. You can't always just use penicillin on a bacterium. It's going to get around that eventually. So, all right, we can keep going.
About 10 years ago now, that I sat in a talk that was given by Mr. Owen, who is now my boss, that I actually questioned
conflict of interest.
And I questioned it for theological reasons, not for scientific reasons initially, although I already knew that you couldn't have absolutely materialistic evolution just because of the complexity of the relationship between genes and proteins. So you sort of mentioned earlier, how could you have a gene selected for something that you don't have yet? But it's even more complicated than that, because you have this
that's wrong
interdependence between the genetic information that's available in the DNA molecules and the proteins that are built using that information, but then they also have to build the coding molecules. So you have this sort of irreducible biomolecular chicken and egg problem. And I already knew that.
Okay, so she's kind of conflating a couple different things. So first of all, his statement earlier, I was laughing about it, but his statement was stupid. When he said, "How do you select the genes for an eye if the eye isn't even a thing yet?" Like, he's got kind of an idea there of what he's trying to talk about, but there's a bunch of different things he's kind of mashed together. So very broadly, in evolution, you have mutations that occur in sequences of DNA. And then the sequences are involved either directly or indirectly in generating proteins. And then these proteins are involved in building different structures throughout your body. And then they can be, due to these mutations, they can be better or worse at doing these particular functions. If they're better, then you are more likely, on average, to survive and have offspring and pass these mutations on to your offspring. If they make you worse, you're probably not going to survive, or at least not as well, and you're not going to have as many offspring as somebody else who does a lot better than you. And so you are, so those negative mutations are going to be weeded out of the population. Now, over time, this can result in adaptations. So you have a gradual accumulation of mutations that are selected through natural selection, or they're selected really by the environment. We call that process natural selection, which can lead to adaptations, can lead to the formation of new species. And of course, everybody all knows this. In the case of the eye, you wouldn't just have an eye wholesale. Like, it's not, our human eye, like you had something without it, and then the next thing was born, and suddenly there's the whole eye. Like, obviously not how that works. I think, Tony, you actually did a video on the evolution of the eye, didn't you?
I did, where I covered all of the intermediate steps. I did branch off and show a little bit about how the eyes in arthropods would form, which is a little bit, it's similar, but it's got some differences. But I even went through every single stage, and I showed a living example of an organism with that stage. And then there's even things I never even came up with in that video that I've heard since then. Like, well, if you have an eye, you also need a nerve to connect it to your brain. And I'm like, well, tell that to jellyfish. They've got eyes, but they don't have brains. They just they react to it. The other, if I can change subjects a little bit, just a little bit, we can go back to it. the argument I hear all the time is about complexity, of all, just complexity in general, whether it's irreducible or specified. And the hallmark of an intelligent design that we see in reality is, with the exception of somebody intentionally making a Rube Goldberg machine, the intelligently designed object is always going to be simpler than the naturally appearing object that performs the exact same functions. It's the hallmark of an intelligent design is actually in its simplicity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that is quite the opposite of what we see with like eyes, for instance. Like, when eyes are compared to cameras a lot, but how a camera works is very different from how our eyes work.
Yes.
With our eyes, you have the phototransduction pathway. So you have a photon that hits a retinal molecule, which is in an opsin protein, and that causes it to straighten out. And so these photons are hitting these all these opsin proteins, which are in this ciliary photoreceptor, and then that's causing I can't remember if it's hyperpolarization or depolarization first, but basically you have like a change of electrical charges along this membrane, and then that's causing the next cell, which I think is an amacrine. I'm not positive. It's been a while since I looked at all this, but so you're causing the next cell in the chain to do the opposite thing, and then you're causing the next cell in the chain to do the opposite thing, and then you're having that signal propagated along another cell, which is then taken to another cell. And it's like, that's nowhere near how cameras work, right? It's completely different. Cameras have this way simpler process than how our eyes work. It's like you got to hand off the baton to like 10 different people versus just one person like running it all the way. It's ridiculous. But that's
that's the hallmark of natural design is it meanders, and suddenly you're making a whole bunch of extra steps. There's the blood cascade, or the clotting cascade. If we had designed a clotting cascade, I guarantee you it might have been one chemical. It would never have been, or might have been two chemicals, but it never would have been a cascade of different chemicals that are reacting to amplify the next cascade. It's a completely different subject, but I don't know where she's going to go, because she was talking about the irreducible complexity, but she didn't really talk about that yet. She just mentioned it.
Okay. Yeah. We can let her keep going.
That existed. So I had to believe in theistic evolution. I couldn't believe in atheistic evolution. But then when I saw what you have to believe about the character of God, particularly that you have to believe that he created through many, many, many millions of years of death, rather than believing that death actually entered the world through sin, I realized that I couldn't.
Wait, pause.
I couldn't be.
Pause, Peter. This is amazing. This is one of the best comments I've ever seen. We need to take back creationism from the heretics. It's our Catholic doctrine since the beginning. That's one of the most hilarious statements I have ever seen. I love the internet. Oh my God.
I also love the fact that she says we have to believe this and we have to believe that. If people are dictating to you what you have to believe, then you've lost the plot already. You need to believe the things that you are convinced of, not something that someone else is telling you that you have to believe this. And this is one of the things why I hate religion.
Because I do agree. It's odd. It's very odd hearing her say, "I'm told to believe this, so that means I have to update my priors about these other things." Like, that's a really weird statement. That's very jarring to hear. But also, Kenneth Miller, famous Catholic evolutionary biologist, does not believe like she believes. Like, he acknowledges evolution is true. So like, I don't know what to say.
The thing that bothers me about that is I mean, I haven't had nearly as much college as you have. Obviously, you've gotten your degree and all that, but the classes I took, it was a biology class, it was an astronomy class, whatever science I was taking. I took a few sciences in college. They were always followed up. I couldn't just take the class. I had to have concurrent enrollment in a lab class or an observatory class. So you're not believing it. You're also you're proving it. You're showing it to yourself. You're
Yes.
going to conduct those experiments. I mean, maybe not every one of them, but I mean,
Right.
the concepts, you are learning them, and you don't need to believe them. You can work with them. You can make them do something.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's in the one of the biology labs I TA'd. When you tell the students in the lecture, hey, alcohol dehydrogenase binds most readily with ethanol. It's not going to bind very well with methanol or ethanol or or propanol. The students don't just have to take your word for it. You're literally either that week or the next week going to go do that experiment in the lab. You're going to take these different alcohols. And you're going to subject the enzyme to them and see which one it binds to best. Like that's what you're going to do. So yeah, you're right. Exactly. You don't just have to take someone's word for it. And that's the entire point of the materials and methods section of every scientific paper is here's what we did so you can do it too, or you can critique us and say, I don't know why you did this instead of this other thing that would apply much better to your system or whatever, right? Like that's exactly why we do this. That's the cool thing about science,
Yeah, and I'll also say that it bothers me all the time when I hear the terms atheistic evolution and I think whatever the other one is, theistic evolution.
Theistic evolution.
There's evolution. You're either a theist who accepts evolution, or you're an atheist who accepts evolution, or you're some other some other disposition. But it's just evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Theistic evolutionist anymore, but I got a little bit hung up on the science because I thought that there was a lot of evidence for it. So I started looking, and the more that I looked, the less that I found, if you will.
So we were talking because a big part of the problem is that it's mainly Protestants doing this young Earth research and science and stuff, because Catholics have kind of bought the myth that evolution is totally acceptable. And it really all goes back to Galileo, where we have this deep internalized wound because Galileo was right and we were wrong. But really, when you even look at that story, it's not that the church was wrong. It's Galileo was censured for other reasons.
Yeah.
So, okay, he's actually right on that. The story of Galileo is actually way oversimplified the way that most people understand it. The idea that he was just professing heliocentrism and that's what got him under house arrest, like, it's true. That is actually a gross oversimplification of the story. But the idea that all Catholics feel like they have to accept evolution because of Galileo in the 1500s or 1600s, whenever it was, that is a ridiculous narrative. That is ludicrous. One of my favorite papers is by Theodosius Dobzhansky, who is Greek Orthodox. He's dead now. And he says in the intro of his paper, something to the effect of it has been questioned by His Holiness the Pope whether new species have been witnessed to evolve. And then he does an experiment where he shows an example of a new species. Bless you. And so it's very fun. That's one of the funniest intros of any paper I've ever seen.
I'm also having a little issue with them using the word research. I think they're using it wrong because if I'm not mistaken, a research paper is not just looking up what other people have done. You're actually forming a hypothesis, making a prediction, and conducting an experiment to test that prediction. That is a research paper. Review paper is a different thing entirely. I think what they're talking about is studying.
Yeah.
It wasn't really that.
Plus, he was wrong too.
Right, but it's such a more complex story. So
yeah.
I actually
did he just say that Galileo was wrong too?
What?
Wait, I am okay. If out of context, if you don't know the whole story, it sounds like he's saying that geocentrism is true. Which,
is he a flat earther? Do you think he's
right?
might be a flat earther?
the thing that got Galileo arrested was not the heliocentrism. That caught me off guard, which is very funny. The thing that got Galileo arrested was his model of heliocentrism actually predicted the paths of the planets worse than the Ptolemaic model, which had been in use up to that point, or some sort of weird hybrid of the two. There was no problem in theory with like bringing heliocentrism onto the table. There were some kind of weird like hybrid models of like heliocentrism and geocentrism. The issue was the paths of the planets that had already been like studied and described. His model actually predicted their paths worse than what the current model did, and so that's part of why he was placed under house arrest. But if you don't know that, it sounds like he's just saying heliocentrism was wrong, which is very funny. So
Okay. Glad he knows.
I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt on this one. He didn't, we'll see.
Okay, but if he turns out to be a flurfer,
that's going to be great. No, if he's a flurfer, that's going to be hilarious. So, all right, let's keep going.
I made the joke that, you can kind of tell when you're if you're talking to somebody that's a convert, you can kind of tell. So Nancy would be a prime example. So our friend Nancy is a convert, but even she told us when we had her on. So Nancy, I'm not revealing anything she hasn't said publicly, but she was struggling with same-sex attraction, and the Protestant view of that would be it's just sinful no matter what. And when she heard the Catholic understanding that the desire and the temptation itself is not sinful, acting on it is, that actually helped her a lot. So the like a big problem we face is that there's not a lot of philosophical depth to the Protestant arguments. So
I love
hearing
this
things from a Catholic perspective where
here. This is great. I love that, like, you really don't see it as much anymore, the fights between Catholics and Protestants. At least I don't personally. They usually seem to be kind of in unison, at least in my Twitter experience. But like, this is very fun. I like seeing the actually, which reminds me, the whole bit about the idea that Galileo was imprisoned because of the heliocentrism, that was actually a Protestant propaganda against the Catholics. The idea was like the Catholics jailed Galileo because he didn't conform to their geocentric model, and it's like that's so. Hearing this is very funny to me. I'm all in. I'm here for it.
Hearing how Hugh Owen described it, where he said really their whole premise is based on that everything has been the same since the beginning. So in other words, when they're dating dinosaur bones, for instance, they're not actually doing radiocarbon dating on it. They're finding where it is in the
they're not doing carbon dating,
whatever Earth it is, and they say, well, the conditions have been like this for millennia, so you get this much sediment every year, so we just deduce this is how far back into. Is that a fair assessment of that? Is that how?
Pause. Yeah. Okay, I hope he says no, because that's not at all how they do that.
No.
That's like it. You would have to. The assumption for that to be true is that erosion does not happen, which is literally the entire reason that we find fossils. Is the sediment that they were buried in originally has been eroded away. Like, that's the entire premise. Like, oh my gosh. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, what do you think the chances are that in the end it's, actually I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
Okay.
I'm sorry. What do you think is the chances that their argument's going to boil down to not knowing the difference between relative dating and absolute dating?
It does seem like that's kind of what he's going for here. But again, he's heard or read, one of the two, a lot of creationist arguments, because these are all almost creationist arguments. It's like he's heard them sort of vaguely, and he's trying to like home in on them, but they're all just kind of like slightly off. But I think that's what he's going for, I think. But also, of course, you don't date dinosaur bones with carbon dating.
Yeah.
No.
That's just not a thing we do.
That's not thing unless you're Hugh
Brian Thomas tried doing. Who is it?
Russ Miller? Hugh Miller?
Oh, was it Hugh Ross? Or
no, it was a Miller. His last name is Miller. He borrowed a He borrowed a bone from one of the museums and he dated it. But what he dated was the shellac.
The shellac that was covering it. Yes. I think this is one of the things that Hovind likes to reference to. At least he used to. I don't know if he does that anymore. But yeah, that was a dating of the shellac.
Okay. I gotcha. Yeah. Dang shellac. What a fun word.
How they date dinosaur bones and things like that.
Yeah, it's a fairly fair assessment. They do use different kinds of radiometric dating besides carbon dating, but those give you such long half-life ages that we can't really calibrate them effectively. So carbon dating is the most reliable, but then nobody does that on dinosaur bones.
Okay, that's true. We don't do carbon dating on dinosaur bones. She's right about that. But actually, again, like atoms, once you like understand the basic principles underlying like radiometric decay, you can make predictions about how long something is going to take to decay, right? Talking about practical applications, we use the breakdown of gallium to like you get injected with it, and the like doctors can look at where it goes in your body to see like, is there a tumor there, or what's going on with your bloodstream? Why is blood not getting to your fingers, or whatever? Like once you have a model of how these things work, it's not like suddenly your model just doesn't work for things that are older. No, it works in both directions. And what's cool is with the technology we have now, we've had frick, the geologist, Age of Rocks. There we go. I'm so sorry. We had Age of Rocks on, and he talked about like actually you can shoot a laser at a rock and you can like date it like going up. You can be like this centimeter is like this age, and you go up a centimeter and it's this age, and you go up another, and it's like you can do that. You can go like all the way up these strata. Wow. And date them. Like they can do that. And so it's not just like, oh, we don't know, we're just kind of guessing in the dark. Like, no. And if she was, well, let's see, she was selling molecular, I would hope she would take like some physics or chemistry classes or something. You would have to for that degree. And nobody ever talked. I don't know. Maybe no one ever talked about it. That's entirely possible, I guess.
I'd be shocked if she didn't at least take like a biological biochem.
Yeah, class. She probably did, but yeah.
I mean, when I took my chemistry classes in college, almost everybody in that class with me was a nurse or was studying to be a nurse. And we went through the very first week was all the applications, and I was the only one there that didn't. I don't care about that because I'm not going to be using any of this for nursing. I was just taking it because I wanted to learn it. But that's I'd be really. It seems odd that she wouldn't know chemistry, at least have some chemistry background.
Yeah, that. I mean, and what's funny is because she said I did the research on this. Did you? She at least said radiometric dating instead of carbon dating, unlike whatever the dude Anthony. Yeah. Anthony, then Rob is on the bottom, and then Pamela. Okay, so
and
Pam.
I just realized that both Anthony and Rob are Catholic, so I guess it is just
they're all Catholic. Yeah,
Catholic young Earth creationists. Wow.
Which this is the second like Catholic young Earth creationist video we watched. We did one. Actually, that reminds me. Thank you, Tony. I have reached out to Romulo, and he seems interested, but he said he will get back to me at the end of the month because they're writing grants right now, which I totally understand. He's going to be busy for weeks, so like I get it. So he said he'll try to get back to us at the end of the month. But yeah, we watched this dude who looked like a discount Duck Dynasty, and he had this a zoologist from Brazil on, who is. I don't think a young Earth creationist. I think he's an ideer, but we're going to try to get him on. So,
if he comes on, that would be cool. That would I would be looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, he says some things that are like kind of red flags, but it wasn't a whole lot of like stuff that he just outright said that was like, whoa, wait a minute.
But
so it was kind of skirting the subjects.
This guy has written papers in in real science, right? So he has two positions at once. So for his job, he's actually a scientist, and then privately, he's an ID proponent. So that would be cool to see where a conversation would lead.
Yeah, he's like written, or he's co-authored, I should say. He's co-authored some papers that are in like Nature, for instance. So he got some real creds. He's co-authored some real papers that get cited. And so it's like, we want to have him on and be like, so where do you fall? Like, I just want to be, I don't want to come at him and just like be aggressive with him like a young Earth creationist. I want to actually know, like, what do you think? Where do you fall? So anyway. Or we could just have him on and him be like, oh no, that's not really what I think. Maybe we just misinterpreted what he said. It's entirely possible. So all right, we can keep going.
Okay.
Because they think that the dinosaur bones are older than the limit of the carbon dating, because the theoretical limit of the carbon dating is about 100,000 years. The practical limit, when you're actually using instruments that can't detect a single molecule, is about 43,000 years.
Okay.
So nobody dates carbon bone except for my friend Hugh Miller, or dinosaur bone.
Oh,
he actually carbon dated 11 different samples of dinosaur bone.
She's doing the thing. Literally, you called it. You called it.
Tony called it.
I cannot believe you called it. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad we had you on for this. This is so good.
I'd expect they were well within that 43,000 year range.
This is why God is right above you.
20 to 30,000 year range, roughly. And he actually got a letter. I have a copy of it somewhere. Basically, from the carbon dating laboratory saying, we're sending your samples back, and we don't really want any more from you because of your anti-scientific agenda, and your conclusions about the age of the Earth. So instead of actually saying, whoa, we're carbon dating dinosaur bones, and they're only dating to 23,000 years, what's up with that? Maybe we should look into this. Maybe we should carbon date some more things that we think are older than 43,000 years and see what happens. They just said, no, we're not going to carbon date this stuff anymore. So,
Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they send it back because they told them that the bones were covered in shellac, and that's what they were dating?
That's what I've been told. I actually cannot confirm that. I haven't been able to find that detail on it. I do know that all of a sudden they were scheduled for some public symposium, and all of a sudden it was canceled. But the creationist story is that the evolutionists canceled it, but it looks like they pulled out themselves. And I just don't know. I don't know what they were actually told by the lab. If you find that source, I would love to have it.
That would be great. This also reminds me of another thing. Are you familiar with oh God, what is his name? The dude who found a bison horn and claimed it was a triceratops. Mark Armitage.
I did an episode on him. I did.
Oh, that's right. Shoot, you did. Yep.
Yeah, I went over both his scam on the college and then also the scam of his research.
That's right. Yeah. He keeps going out there. I think Dapper did a video where he pointed out like he actually found like the geolocation of where Armitage claimed to have gotten this totally a triceratops horn, and it was like quaternary rock. So,
Yeah, well, that wouldn't work, would it?
No, but of course he gets very Armitage gets very defensive if you try to suggest like, hey, this really seems a lot more like a bison horn than a triceratops horn. He's like, no.
Yeah, I've taken on some of his arguments for why he said it's obviously a triceratops horn because bison horns actually have bone going up in them, or the other way around. I'm not sure.
Something like that, yeah.
But the horn itself, he was absolutely wrong. Both species have a horn going up, have a piece of bone going up into the horn itself. But I will tell you this: he got very angry with me. He wasn't happy with my video at all. And he said anybody is allowed to look at this horn. All you have to do is give me the name of the university or institution you work for, and I will gladly let you examine the horn. So, Jackson, can you do that?
That's actually not Let's see. Do we have any? We don't have any paleontologists on the payroll, but I do happen. I don't know. I wonder if it would be an imposition. Maybe I could potentially. Maybe I'd have to ask. But maybe that's an interesting. I did not know that. Okay, I'll have to think about that. Okay, if it's real, if that's a real offer, I can ask. I can ask if they would do it. If they would take time out of their very busy schedule to take a look at it.
Yeah.
I know a lot of them are very busy with stuff, and a bunch of them would probably tell me buzz off, but
yeah,
but maybe
they probably don't think this is a really important conversation, but it
interesting.
is.
Okay, I didn't know that. Huh. Okay, all right, interesting. I'll think about that.
What's funny about this is what really started me on this journey was watching this stupid Graham Hancock documentary, Ancient Apocalypse. And when he tried to challenge
he started watching Ancient
things,
Aliens,
he got this crazy pushback and they accused him of being a racist. Now, he wasn't doing it from a Christian point of view. He was doing it trying to prove that they were these civilizations. And his whole narrative is that there was this ancient flood that wiped everything out. Now, he won't say it's the biblical flood.
So, funny enough, RJ and I go through that we go through that in The Rocks Were There Volume 2. That's part of our flood, part of the flood chapter that RJ wrote. So yeah, we'll go through exactly that and poke it full of holes. But I do love that he said, no, it was Ancient Aliens that was the thing that really got me thinking about this. He looks like a Joe Rogan bro, doesn't he? Like, he looks like the kind of dude to be like won over by Ancient Aliens and
I will say that I kind of relate to him because I was never a creationist, as I said, but I did get my doctorate in divinity with an emphasis on apologetics. I was ready and willing to be a minister for a living. And believe it or not, just came across some of Graham Hancock stuff, and then reading different scriptures and reading different accounts, because you don't really learn so much about the Sumerian texts or anything like that when you're in seminary, and that opened my eyes a little bit, and that kind of helped me poke holes in my own belief.
Interesting.
And then of course, but again. It took actual going to research, and I was going to try to disprove him. I was going to try to defend Christianity against that evil Graham Hancock, and it turned out in the end that he's wrong, but so was the entire thing that I devoted my life to.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I have you since looked at Epic of Gilgamesh and all that sort of stuff, and didn't you? I think I remember vaguely. I could be wrong, so tell me if I'm wrong. You mentioned at one point doing some kind of project, going through the world religions or showing their phylogeny or something. Or...
Yeah, that's something I'd still like to do. It's just a mammoth task, but the evolution of religion, just going but keep in mind that when I first came up with the idea, YouTube was different. You could put a little button right in the middle of the video halfway through saying click here to see where this goes. Yeah, the annotations. You used to be able to do that, and that was what I was going to do. It was going to be sort of a little choose your own adventure through the biblical through the history of religion, so that if I'm talking about the origins of Christianity and you have to talk about Mandeanism, which actually came from a polytheistic paganist group, but that's where John the Baptist group came from, was this Mandean group who were not Christian at all, but he was obviously held in wide regard at the time of Jesus. And so when you study him from the Mandeanism view, they kind of hate John the Baptist because he invited non-Mandean people into the fold, like supposedly Jesus. And so it would have been great to, right in the middle of both of those, to be able to have a button to say click here to see where that one goes from. And it's kind of hard to do that now because I'm not really good with cards, and I don't really like to do just the things at the end. I'd rather do it where you can hit
Sure.
it and move from there. So,
right. I mean, yeah, because people used to be able to do like okay, and if you want to know more about that, just go look at this right here. Anyway, moving on, and then just on to the next thing. Yeah, that's fair. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, that's fair. I guess though. I guess one way you could get around that is I suppose you could say if you're interested in this, in the description is this, which not quite the same, but I guess that'd be about the closest you could. I guess.
Yeah, I could do that probably, and maybe I will do it if I get myself retired or something.
That's fair. Yeah, I've got all these projects I want to work on. All these unfinished projects. There's a couple of books. There's one titled, what is it? 1177 BC, the year civilization ended, and then there's another book that's the sequel to that is after 1177 BC. Have you seen those?
I haven't, but I will look them up.
I think that's the right. I believe that is the right 1177. Is it BC? Yeah. 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed. That's the name of it. I could put it here in our side chat.
I'm assuming that it goes over perhaps a flood as part of the reason why civilization collapsed.
Of course, yeah, it was the global flood.
Has to be.
And RJ and I do talk quite a bit about, and this is also RJ's chapter on the flood, about the Epic of Gilgamesh and how it came out way before Genesis came along, and the similarities and the differences. And creationists just really don't know how to deal with the fact that there are a lot of similarities between Gilgamesh and the flood story, and they kind of run the gamut from, on the one hand, you have guys who are like, they're the exact same story because obviously this is the same event. It's just being called two different things. To, on the other hand, no, they're completely different things. They're nothing alike. Gilgamesh is this totally other thing. It's not, the Noah story. It's just creationists have no idea how to deal with it. It's very funny to watch.
Yeah, and of course I've got to be that guy and mention the Atrahasis, which predated Gilgamesh. All of those, and the elements are still there. The arguments that I've seen for it are that those are people that perverted the story to match their culture. Of course, I did an episode on flood, the mythical floods around the world, and they're really not that similar.
Yeah, Talk.origins has a page that just goes through like all of them, and you can see how some are those narratives. When creationists say like all the flood stories are similar, what they mean is like literally those three, because they're all the Near East, like the Mesopotamian flood stories. If you go to even if you go to Persia, it's not the same. It's a series of local floods for Persia. If you go to China, it's local floods. If you go to the Native Americans or this particular group of Native Americans, it's like everyone was turned into fish, and then the gods made a new generation of humans and then that's us. It's very, very different. There's all these different elements that are tribe or culture specific because it's their culture. And then and so when they say, oh, they're all the same, no, they're not anywhere near the same. So so okay, we can keep going.
But I mean, it's the biblical flood,
Right.
So but it just shows that there is this ideology behind what they believe, and they won't even allow their thesis to be challenged in any way whatsoever. So anybody that tries to challenge it gets this huge pushback, and they claim you're being anti-scientific when that's not really what it is. So while we're on the subject of Dinosaur,
I do want to say one thing, and this is a shout out to one of your videos, Tony. In the specified complexity video, you make the very funny comment. You're reading William Dembski's work, and he says all the criticisms of me are true, but I wish evolutionists would be that critical of their own work. That line sent me. I loved it so much.
That was actually the title of the paper. If only evolutionists were so critical of their own work.
Yeah, that absolutely sent me. I love that line. So that kind of sounds like what kind of makes me think, or he made me think of that. So.
That's kind of what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, we keep going.
because I never knew this until Hugh told us, but that they found soft tissue in dinosaur bones. So that when we spoke to him, it sent me on this whole rabbit hole on YouTube of just looking up soft tissue in dinosaur bones. Now, is it really just the one sample that woman found, or is this found in multiple samples of dinosaur
that woman
bones?
being Dr. Mary Schweitzer?
Lots of samples of soft tissue found in ancient bones, and then in ancient bloodworms and things like that are invertebrates. So Kevin Anderson, who's got a PhD in, I think it's in paleontology, but he does research up in Hell Creek as well. He compiled a couple of times. So he did an original book, Echoes of the Jurassic, and then he updated a second edition of it. He compiled a whole bunch of different examples of soft tissue found in dinosaur bones, as well as soft tissue found in other ancient materials.
So first of all, he's dead. Kevin Anderson has... Oh, wait, Kevin Anderson. No, he's not a paleontologist. This is the dude that I talked to on Standing for Truth's channel. This dude's like he's a microbiologist. That's right. I was like, wait a second. No, yeah. No, he's not a paleontologist. He doesn't know anything about paleontology. And I actually tried talking with him about paleontology in that discussion, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Because I brought up the similarities between like early horses and early rhinos, and how you basically have to be an expert in like dental morphology to tell them apart. No, he's full of crap. Yeah, that's right. So, Tony, would you like to? Are you familiar with the soft tissue stuff?
A bit. I've done a couple episodes on it, but she was mentioning. I think she said bloodworms. I think she's probably talking about the paper that was published on tube worms, and they did find some tube worms from 500 million years ago. And the claim is that the paper describes soft tissue found in tube worms. When you read the actual paper, the line is what they say in the line is that the material was soft and pliable. But they're not saying
it was actual soft tissue.
In life, when it was still alive 500 million years ago, it was soft and pliable. The tube that the worm was in was soft and pliable. That's what they're saying. They're not saying that when they were examining it, because what they would say is the material is soft and pliable. They would never. They were describing it as it was. It was completely preserved. It was completely fossilized. But because at the time we didn't have that wonderful website that I always am afraid to mention, because I don't want them to be taken down ever. But it was hard to get the papers and read them for yourself, and that one was one of those that's hard to read. I know what website
you're talking about, and it's unfortunate that it doesn't exist.
Did it go down?
There are no hubs of science. There aren't any sci hubs. They don't exist. They aren't real. It would be very nice if that were a website that existed. They could call it like Sci Hub or something, but it doesn't exist, sadly.
Maybe if there's a dash in there somewhere.
Yeah, it would be nice, but sadly, it doesn't exist. So.
I do want to thank you though, because you were the first person to tell me that didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I had to. I had to set you straight. So.
You probably got tired of me having to. It was really hard for me to do my research before then.
That website that doesn't exist is not a godsend. Like, it's not one of the best websites on the internet. It's very tragic it doesn't exist. So yeah.
I got a wife that she does have a degree in psychology, but she was a cheerleader growing up. She still coaches cheer, and she thinks it's the geekiest thing that I would have gone to that site that doesn't exist and looked up things, and she sees me doing that all the time. Like, you're such a nerd. Gosh.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really fun. And also because I have an email with the university, I can use what's called the interlibrary loan, which they can send both books and papers. So I can request, like, if something is not on the website that doesn't exist, I can request a PDF of it through the interlibrary loan, and then they can go get it for me. And I actually I actually had to do that for a paper. So I have a copy of a paper that is not on the internet as a result of the interlibrary loan. Actually, probably a couple of them, because I have tried searching for this. This paper is not on that website. It's from like 1956, I think, because Dawkins references it, and I had to use it for one of the Ancestors Tale videos, and so I had to get this paper, but you can't get it anywhere online, and so like, I wish there was something I can do with it. I still have it, but I don't know what to do with it. But I'd love to send it to them, but I don't know how that works. So
right.
Be like, here you go. Anyway, but yeah.
So this is actually becoming quite common. Dr. Mary Schweitzer was the first one to discover it because nobody was really looking for it because, according to
why would you?
What we understand about biochemistry and the laws of physical decay, it simply wouldn't be there if that bone was 67 million years old.
Oh,
so
shoot.
They found it by accident. And then at first.
Okay, so she is right on that. She is right on the story. The Schweitzer and Jack Horner, they found it by accident. And they did the test. They ran it through. They run this material through. It was a very long name acid, and then they did that for like weeks, and then it had broken off it degraded the calcium that was surrounding the proteins, and that made it pliable. Now, I have to point out, this whole argument is based on a faulty premise. The faulty premise is actually the very name of the argument, which is soft tissue. Nothing that has been found to date in any like actual fossils qualifies as tissue. None of it. A blood cell is not a tissue. A protein is not a tissue. What's the other one? The ink from that like cephalopod that was fossilized. Ink is not a tissue. Or the like little bit that they found. Because technically, I guess blood is a connective tissue. But this ink, this little bit they found, is not a tissue. None of these things they found are actual tissues because tissue involves multiple cells. Protein is not multiple cells, right?
Right.
So a single blood cell, which it's not even actually the blood cell. The material of the biological material of the cell is not there anymore. It's the heme molecule. Like, well, yeah, of course that's going to stick around. It's mostly iron. And all these other things like chitin and stuff like that. There are a couple of different chemical attributes that can increase the likelihood of some biological material sticking around for a very long time. And actually, I'm going to shout out an older creationist, Fazal Rana, who wrote a really good book on dinosaur soft tissue. It's titled, was it Dinosaur Blood and the Age of the Earth, I believe is the title of it. Very good book. It's not very long, pretty short, but it's really good. It goes through these arguments and debunks them. So one of the things is that you have like the delocalized like electrons. So you have like the sheet of this material, and the electrons are not localized, and as a result of that, the material like is less likely to degrade because the electrons are not localized. Another aspect of it is having cross-linking. So with the proteins, like the what was the protein in the collagen? There we go. The collagen has this structure where you have lots of cross-links between the different strands, and that also strengthens their bond. And so once you have that, and then once you basically encase it in like a mineral, it's like these things are going to stick around for a really, really, really long time. And to date, the arguments I've seen from creationists have really never argued against that. There are a few papers in the actual like literature by creationists who even in those papers they talk about these mechanisms, and even they are like, yeah, these seem pretty solid. So what is it Eric Hovind likes to say, that like blood pours out of these fossils or whatever when paleontologists find them? It's something ridiculous. Yeah. So okay, we keep going.
she didn't believe it was really there. So she told her tech, we'll do it again. And then she said, well, I still don't believe it. We'll do it again. So you can actually see her talk about this in the 60 Minutes interview she did, which is fascinating. And you can see they take these little tweezers and they pull on the tissue under the microscope, and then they let go of the tweezers and it snaps back.
Yeah, it's like elastic.
Yeah, it's crazy. That tissue is not.
We have to play this one clip because Jimmy Aiken was on. He did a debate on Pints with Aquinas with Gideon Lazar, and Gideon Lazar had brought up the fact that there's soft tissue in dinosaur bones, and I want to play Jimmy's response and just see what you think of how he responded to this. Rob, did I label it properly? You can tell which one it is.
So to respond, I would say that while it is surprising and it's an interesting and welcome discovery that there can be soft tissue in petrified bones that date to 70 or more million years ago, that is unexpected, but it doesn't actually give us reason to believe that they're young, because soft tissue will remain tissue indefinitely for millions of years, if you isolate it from its environment, so it doesn't have anything to interact with. If you put it in a freezer and in a vacuum and cut it off from any other elements to interact with, it's going to stay soft tissue forever. And so the inference that you can draw is that in this hunk of rock that formed from a bone, there was a pocket that was sufficiently cut off from its environment that we have a form of soft tissue left. Now that's unexpected,
that's exactly
but it doesn't
what I
give
said
us
to Matt
reason
Powell.
to believe that this rock that formed from a hunk of bone is recent, because we don't have good evidence for rocks being formed from bones by underground water leaching through them in just a few thousand years. You need longer than that to have petrification.
He's absolutely right. He's like 100% correct.
That's all I clipped. So, but it's almost like he's saying there was this pocket that was.
So yeah, so that answer is 100% correct. Like, he is absolutely right when he says that. Yeah, because what these guys don't understand about fossilization is not just permineralization. Like, sequestering something is one way that you can prevent it from being degraded, right? It's not simply that something has to be buried rapidly. Like Ken Ham loves to say, there are billions of critters, buried by water all over the earth. And like, the burial is part of it. That is a form of sequestration, but that's not the only form of sequestration. So for instance, one of the world's most famous fossils is a horseshoe crab called Mesolimulus that is in the Solnofin formation. It's the same formation that Archaeopteryx comes from. This little guy was not buried rapidly. What happened was this little guy sank, and he went into an anoxic region of water, so there's not a lot of oxygen, and he tries to escape. And you can see this because he has this very long trail. He tries to get out, but he doesn't, and ultimately he suffocates. But because there's no bacteria down there that's able to metabolize him and degrade him, he was preserved like perfectly. That is a form of sequestration. And so him being away from forces that would degrade him, that's going to contribute to his fossilization, right? So like the guy, the other discount Duck Dynasty, he's right. That's absolutely true.
There's another example of that exactly, of sequestration, is all of the amber inclusions that we've had for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Many of them predate the dinosaurs even. We have ancient. Well, heck, we even actually have a dinosaur tail that has been preserved. We knew about that long before Schweitzer made her discovery. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's when they say it's a specific type of fossilization that was interesting. That was really what was interesting about it. It was a permineralization as opposed to just being locked in amber for millions of years. And so, I mean, what you said exactly is right. That's what he said. And I'm wondering how these people are going to try to make it for creationism, or are they going to just say that's just evolutionists trying to make an excuse? I wonder.
All right, let's see. Place your bets, audience. All right, let's see.
Hermetically sealed away from its environment, but that's pretty crazy to me.
So he's never been to
Okay, so they just said no. Okay.
So when they're digging up these bones, they're actually often saturated in water as they're digging them up. So the idea that this bone could have been hermetically sealed from the environment is actually, that's already been a theory that was put forward by researchers and was rebutted in the scientific literature. So unfortunately for Mr. Aiken, he didn't actually, he
it
came up
hasn't
with something
actually
on the fly that actually other scientists, put forward to object to this, but it's
no, actually, that is not true. Again, we're talking about something that's inside a bone. Now, in this particular case, in the case of like Mary Schweitzer's the collagen that she found, that may not have been inside the bone. It may have been that they found it on the side or whatever. But saying like that's impossible for a section within the bone, because remember, bones are formed by osteocytes that then secrete the like hydroxyapatite and stuff that then forms the bone. It is absolutely possible for something to be stuck in there, and then this thing gets permineralized, so the minerals get leached out, and that soft tissue remains inside. Like saying that that's impossible is insane to me. I was like, just I don't know. You were right. You were right, Tony. They just kind of went no. Like I would be fascinated to find a single paper that says it is impossible for anything to like be sequestered within a fossil. I would challenge her to provide that, which she's not going to. I mean, they're just having a conversation, so she's not going to cite any literature. But in all the research I've ever done on this, I have never seen any papers make that sort of claim. So I call bogus.
Already been debunked. So
plus, he's claiming it would have had to have happened to every single bone that these samples have been taken from.
Right, and he probably didn't know at the time that he was dealing with many samples versus one sample, because that makes his hypothesis a lot less tenable. But it just that hypothesis doesn't hold water. So they put forward a couple. They proposed that it was a bacterial biofilm. So Dr. Schweitzer herself disputed this, and she said, well, I'm going to test for the presence of collagen, which is a protein that's only present in vertebrates. So she took some antibodies for collagen, and they bound the tissue, which meant that it had collagen in it, which meant that it came from a vertebrate. So, she proved it wasn't a bacterial biofilm. And honestly, if you know anything about bacterial biofilms, it doesn't really look like a bacterial biofilm. They don't form structures that look like blood vessels or dendritic cells, but that's okay. And then she came up with this theory that maybe it was the iron. It was the iron in the blood cells that.
Wait, pause a moment. Okay, first of all, this is a very snarky thing. Like, I'm pretty sure the researchers had reasons for saying like, hey, we need to test all the, like when it was first proposed that this was actual material from a Tyrannosaur. That was a pretty substantial claim that no one had provided evidence for in the past, and so it was incumbent on Mary Schweitzer and her team to demonstrate that all the potential alternatives were not true, right? But Pam here is very snarky. She's like, that's not how it looks. What are you talking about? Have you ever seen like actinomycetes, or like the bacteria form a massive variety of different colonies with different morphologies? Like to just say blanket, like no bacteria like form colonies like that, like that's just wrong. First of all, that just isn't true. But also, you do need to demonstrate that that's not the case.
That's actually, and the thing about that, there's a certain about scientists and how they handle that. Mary Schweitzer gave up samples to Thomas K. to go ahead and do his own research. He and Joseph Peterson concluded that Schweitzer's initial findings were correct, and actually for the reasons that Pamela said. And but then they also pointed out that if there was bacterial biofilm on the exterior of the find, it would actually aid in the preservation of the soft tissues within.
Interesting. Hold on, I want to look up one thing because she mentioned to. I think I know what she's about to say, but I want to have my counter because it has also been a little while since I looked at all this material.
I'm thinking she's going to say something to the point of, well, yeah, it lasted for 2 years, but that's not 2 million years. That's not 65 million years. And the other ones is the ideal situations that they come up where they made sure that it was completely clean of just iron and the original tissue. That's what I'm guessing. One of those two.
Yeah, the iron. Yes, here we go. Because yeah, the electron delocalization that also applies to heme, which of course is in our red blood cells, and so that's going to be one of the factors that is promoting their preservation. So, okay, we can keep going.
That lysed and that somehow preserved the tissue for 67 million years. So she did an experiment that lasted for about 2 years on her lab bench and extrapolated that to 67 million years. Now, if I were allowed to extrapolate my $2 to $67 million, I'd really appreciate that. But the banks don't like that very much.
Okay, so Brian, pause for a moment. So I think it was Brian Thomas. I could be wrong. Also, I think Tony's frozen.
I am frozen.
If you refresh, it might fix your camera.
All right,
it happens to me sometimes. I'm pretty sure there was an article. I think it was Brian Thomas, where he said that he acknowledged that the iron preservation mechanisms work. Like we talked about this was it in the first rocks? No, we fully covered in rocks too. Oh, there was some place where we talked about it previously because I remember an article. Some creationists. It's like 2 creationists co-wrote this article on dinosaur soft tissue and the mechanisms preserving it, and even they were like, yeah, okay, this iron really does play a role in preserving the soft tissue, quote, quote. So her saying no, it doesn't, like, again, she's just not up on the literature. So, was it Brian Thomas? Dinosaur soft tissue? Was it him? I could be wrong.
I'm going to drop out and come back.
Okay, sounds good. No, this was published in no. Okay, what was it? What article was it? I could be wrong. RJ, do you remember what the article was that was about? It was by like 2 creationists on the mechanisms of soft tissue preservation. Soft tissue Whoops. Who was it? Who did that paper? No, it wasn't Schweitzer. It was 2 creationists. But they published it in like a real journal. Dang, I cannot remember who it was. You're checking? Okay. You're back and you're moving.
Yep.
Dang. Who was I feel like oh man, I feel so silly. I cannot remember who it was. Is this also this heme? Yeah, okay. Also, here's this is by Phil Center, who is a paleontologist, and this is a paper on the preservation mechanisms within bone. So, previous studies reviewed by Schweitzer et al. 2007 had already determined that intimate association with bone minerals can keep osteocytes intact for extended periods. And also, the iron-containing heme group in hemoglobin and myoglobin inhibits breakdown by enzymes, and thus can inhibit autolysis, the breakdown of a dying cell by its own enzymes. And 3, unstable metal ions catalyze the formation of oxygen-free radicals, which cause chain reactions that forge irreversible cross-linkages between organic molecules and thereby prevent complete breakdown of these organic molecules. So, yeah. So this chick is just not up on the literature like at all. So I don't really know what else to say about that. So, other than she just doesn't know what she's talking about. So, okay, we can keep going. Oh,
unfortunately,
wait,
her
there it is. Wait, RJ found it. Peter, can you pull that one up, please? Though Brian Thomas and Stephen Taylor 2019 acknowledged in their technical publication for the expert review of proteomics that no serious rebuttals of iron preservation have yet emerged. That's what it was. Yes. So even the creationists, oops, why am I so tall? Even the creationists have acknowledged that there's no evidence against the iron formation, or the iron preservation. Yes. Thank you, RJ. This is why you're the best. This right.
Yep. My apologies. The server that we use to pull up the YouTube comments is currently down. I've been checking into that, but I can't get it started.
That's okay.
Started back up again. So
I read it out loud, so it's all good. But we have it in Rocks too. So for anybody, I knew I'd seen it. I was like, I feel like I'm crazy. I knew I'd seen it before. Okay. Okay, we keep going.
Experiment, while it showed that you could get some tissue preservation over a period of 2 years with things that were soaked in iron, you really can't extrapolate that to 67 million years. It's
not according
it's
to
an inappropriate
to Thomas and Taylor
use of your data. So I tell people sometimes I used to sit in worm meetings at the NIH. So I used to work in a nematode lab up at Catholic University of America. After I left the lab that I was working in on vaccines because they were using abortifetal cells, I went over to the worm lab and we would sit in what they called worm meetings at the NIH. And there were scientists that almost came to blows over, this much extrapolation on close to 500,000 data points, and this is 2 years of data points and 67 million years of extrapolation. This doesn't fly in any other field of science other than evolution and cosmology. You're not allowed to make that kind of extrapolation.
He's claiming, he said that, well, of course, if they're hermetically sealed, that soft tissue can last for millions of years, but there's no proof for that except for the samples he's claiming.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't even make sense.
Wait, is he saying there's no evidence for that except the evidence that he's claiming?
An anomalous finding.
Is that what he just said?
That's what he's saying.
Okay.
Which is the same thing that endosymbiotic theory is, this idea that somehow the mitochondria is bacteria that was once upon a time swallowed by a eukaryote and it just didn't get digested, and now it's symbiotically living with a cell, and that's how we got eukaryotes. It's an explanation that's after the fact to explain something that they can't explain.
Wait, hold on a second. Let's pause for a moment. First of all, I'm frozen now. I'm a fool. Hold on one second.
Boy, I bet what he's going to say is going to be amazing, though.
Okay.
There we go.
The endosymbiotic hypothesis is extremely well supported. The idea that scientists just came up with an idea to be like, I don't know, let's just throw whatever we have, and see what sticks. That's insane. One of my favorite pieces of evidence for the endosymbiotic hypothesis is, aside from the fact that mitochondria and chloroplasts have their own genome and their own ribosomes separate from the cells, they also use this I guess requires a bit of explanation. Whenever you have an amino acid sequence that becomes a polypeptide chain, which is then folded to make a protein, what happens is the first one is always the start codon, the one that says, okay, start here. And that for eukaryotes, so everything that has a cell has a nucleus in its cells, is methionine. So methionine is the start codon for all eukaryotes. However, for bacteria, archaea also use methionine. So both archaea and eukaryotes, very strange. It's almost like we're related or something. Use methionine as our start codon, but bacteria is the only domain of living organisms that uses a different start codon, which is called the letter N-formyl, Formyl -methionine. Tony, pop quiz time. Would you like to guess which start codon both mitochondria and chloroplast use? Do you think it is the archaean eukaryotic one, or do you think it's the bacterial one?
I've got a feeling it's bacterial.
It's the bacterial one. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's one of the things that drove Lynn Margulis, along with, having its own genome and ribosomes, to say, this really looks like a bacterium. And what's funny is for chloroplasts, this had kind of already been figured out. There were some Russian teams back in the 50s who had already kind of said, chloroplast looks an awfully lot like the cyanobacterium Gliomargarita. Like they look really, really similar. And then Lynn Margulis came along in the West because there was a series of events that kind of caused a rifting, a splitting, if you will, between Russia and the Western world. And so in that time, Margulis wrote this paper, I think it was in 72, in which she kind of put forth the endosymbiotic hypothesis. And immediately the chloroplast idea was seized upon. Pretty much every microbiologist was like, yeah, we kind of figured this. This makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense of the data. Mitochondria was a bit harder to sell at first because mitochondria are actually quite different from the bacteria that they are most genetically closely related to. Because, like, I can't believe I have to say this again. They have their own genome. We can just look at their genome and compare it to other bacteria. And chloroplasts are genetically, like, literally sister to glio. Is it Gliomargarita? Yeah. And what's funny is, brief tangent for a moment, there's a different type of chloroplast that's in the protist Pollinella that is a different species of cyanobacteria. It's Synechococcus. It's obviously cyanobacteria. But for mitochondria, it was a bit more difficult because one, mitochondria is very different from even the things that it's most closely related to. And it's kind of hard to figure it out because it's so much of its genome has been absorbed into the host genome. So mitochondria only make like a few proteins, like they make their ribosomes, they make a few of the enzymes involved in aerobic respiration, and really not much else. There's really not a whole lot they do on their own because most of that's been taken by the nucleus. And so the things that they're most closely related to are what's called the alpha proteobacteria. It's not clear whether mitochondria is within this group or like right next to it, but it's around there. And so like rickettsia, the bacterium that causes typhus, is in that group, and that's kind of a close relative of mitochondria. But like her framing as a cell and molecular person, which she said she is, her framing of the endosymbiotic hypothesis as like it's just a story they came up with after the fact is mind blowing. Like I don't believe she thinks that. There's no way. There's no way she just believes that. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, well, what you thought, what you were saying, just kind of sent my head in a bunch of different directions. But I'll try to stay relevant.
Okay.
Because you talked about the difference of the bacterial, and there's a thing about the ribosome. The bacteria, they have the very basic, all 6 phases of their ribosome, mm-hmm. But the discovery of the kingdom of Archaea was by mm-hmm. Carl Woese, who observed that there was a rudimentary phase 7 in Archaea, which is almost like the full-on phase 7 of all eukaryotes. Mm. So it's interesting. I didn't realize that I never even put together that the mitochondria we would have that just 6-phase ribosome, and that is actually, as you probably know, has stayed the same. I mean, everybody has the exact same 6 phases of their ribosome. But what I was going to bring up, I think it was Dr. Dan, Creation Myths, who was talking about there's an organism we see now that has something that's becoming endosymbiotic.
That's Pollinella.
Pollinella, is that what that is?
So yeah, so it's using Synechococcus, which is a different genus of cyanobacteria, as its chloroplast instead of the Gliomargarita-like chloroplast, which is used by everybody else.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So what's funny is things with chloroplasts are very promiscuous in endosymbiosis. Basically what happens is the sort of like the ancestor of algae, of green and red algae. So that group is called the I'm having to draw. It's called the archaeplastids, which means the old plastid, because chloroplast is one type of plastid. So, or you have the chloroplast, and that ancestor before the red and the green algae split off. So that ancestor had a chloroplast, which allows them to do photosynthesis. So then independently, a bunch of different groups of protists decided, hey, what if I eat a red alga, and then instead of digesting it, I actually turn it into my own symbiont? And so dinoflagellates did that, foraminifera, like coccoliths, a lot of different groups. So like the phytoplankton are protists that have a red alga endosymbiont within them, which then itself has both the chloroplasts and the mitochondria. And there's one group which is called the chlorarachniophytes, which have a red alga within them, but that red alga still has a vestigial nucleus within it. So the nucleus is still there. It's just not doing anything anymore.
Wow. Where's the genome?
It has been absorbed by the host.
Oh, no kidding.
The host basically what happens is when you have endosymbiosis, the genes from the endosymbiont get absorbed into the host. So you have this exchange, and basically the only thing that the endosymbiont retains is like its very core proteins that it needs to do its own little processes. So yeah, chlorarachniophytes. It's a fun word. But yeah, you should check them out. They're pretty cool. They have vestigial nucleus. But yeah, again, like the idea that endosymbiosis is just bogus is kind of ridiculous. What was his name? Dapper and I talked to this. I realized we only have 3 minutes left, so I'll be brief. Dapper and I talked to this one guy a while back, and he, I can't remember what Jeremy Spry, I think was his name, and he asked us. He was like, "What are your thoughts on endosymbiosis?" And I lay out like all this stuff, and he just kind of at the end of it, he just goes, "Huh. Okay, I guess I need to do more research on this topic." And we were like, okay, all right, and we moved on to something else. So yeah. I've even talked to Fazal Rana about that. Even he's like, yeah, okay, endosymbiosis has a lot of benefits, in favor of it. So it's like, we're coming about to the 2-hour mark. Can you believe we have spent 2 hours having fun?
How far into the video did we actually get?
Probably not very.
I can check. Hold on.
We're gonna feel real embarrassed. It's gonna be like 5 minutes.
No, no. Actually, we did a lot more. 15 minutes and 48 seconds of a 1 hour.
Hey, that's not bad.
And we have 1 hour and 29 minutes left.
Oh my God!
All right, Tony, we're only gonna have you on for like the rest of the year at this rate. So no. Anyway, so. Do you have anything you want to shill before we hop off, or?
I really wish I did.
Okay, fair enough.
Everything I'm doing right now is contracted to private companies. As I was telling you before, you're wondering when I'm going to come up and do some more videos, and I will, and I do want to. But I've because of what I've done on YouTube, I'm now doing a lot of industrial work, making videos and tutorials and instructional videos for companies, most notably right now TripAdvisor. So their employees, especially under Viator, which is one of their subsidiaries, are being trained by me. They like my voice, they like my editing, and they like my style of video. So it works perfectly for what they do.
Hey, I totally understand. I also like your voice and your style of videos. So
yeah,
you definitely have the gravitas, and doing the like evolutionists think that blah blah blah. Yeah, I love that. That intro is great.
It's the way, it just makes it really gets across that nasty feeling of those idiot evolutionists, and then the idea of that show is just a pie in the face. Every single one of them is, I'm gonna watch him. Okay, now he's gonna show us how. No, he's not going to show us how evolution is wrong. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on and doing the show with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. I love it. It's been a while since you and I have done a show. And Peter, it's been a while since I've done anything with you as well. And I really have not even used that intro you made me since that one video. And I need to, because that's a whole new series I intended to put together.
Wasn't there one show?
It was just one show, but it was meant to be one episode. And it actually used this image that's behind me as part of it. It was about creationism and science, and it's a half-hour episode that pretty much, I would say, encapsulates the whole how creationism taught me real science. But it's sort of the launching point. I wanted to go over much more controversial subjects that are more divisive and try to show them both fairly without passing too much judgment. I'm going to be honest with my bias, but I haven't done that because I've been chickening out on finishing them, because I know they're gonna be upsetting.
It's hard. I think it's hard to do that because at some point the facts just force you to pick a side.
Yes.
You know, if like it's impossible to be, and that's kind of why I dislike a lot of the way that the media does interviews, is they have a roundtable discussion about something, and it's like, no, he's just lying. Like, this person is trying to defend reality, and this other person is just lying. There's not a there's not a gray area here. It's not like, okay, well, he's kind of making some points there. No, that's not what's happening. You know, like, that's how I feel about a lot of like the anti-vax stuff. You know, it's like when they say the vaccines are killing people en masse, it's like, no, that just isn't happening. You can't be neutral on that topic. It's like you have to be honest with the data.
But research going to primary sources, it takes effort. It really does. And what sucks is I know they should make their money. Journals should make money, but they are in a way a barrier to the knowledge that we could get. Thankfully, most scientists I've talked to, whenever I ask about a paper, they're usually willing to give me a copy of their paper.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Going on like ResearchGate, for instance. If you just go on ResearchGate, a lot of times you can email the authors of the study. And as you say, they'll just be like, yeah, here you go. You know, like it may be on Science or Nature and it's behind a paywall, but they go, yeah, here you go. You know, there's a PDF.
They're not getting any money off of it. They're happy anyway. They're glad somebody's looking at their research. I will say, you were asking about that earlier, Peter, about the reactions I've gotten. I can say what I do like is I have gotten people writing to me and that I've cited their research. There's an Australian physicist by the name of Andrew Truscott, who I did an episode on particle wave duality in quantum mechanics. And he did an experiment that kind of, it's hard to explain, but I explain it in the video itself. It takes probably 3-4 minutes to explain it. But he got back to me saying, wow, you actually represented it correctly, and you didn't use it to argue something I'm against. So great. He was happy.
Those are the cool reactions.
There was another person. Then there was also one other guy. I did an episode on life from scratch, and there was a guy who was a filmmaker, and I used part of his video, but his only upset, he wrote to me at once thanking me for using his work, but that I had found the wrong picture, like a picture of somebody else who I thought looked just like him. But he goes, no, that guy's far better looking than me. So I had to go ahead and put his picture up instead. And it didn't look much different to me, but there's a reason why video was actually up and then gone and then up again. It's because, I mean, I'm misrepresenting the person I had. It's the only time I've ever done that.
Sure. No, that's totally fair. I actually, an origin of life researcher named Liam Longo actually reached out to me. And because I cited one of his papers in a video I did way back, and apparently my video came up on some like citation database.
No kidding.
And which is super weird, because he reached out and was like, hello, I saw that you cited this paper, and and he was like, would you like to talk about it? And I was like, heck yeah. And so I think several of us because like RJ Ness, like a few of us like chatted with him, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't really want to come on camera, but I'll happy to talk to you about this." And so it was super cool. Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, it was really neat. But yeah, so okay. Well, thank you again for coming on. Thank you, Peter, for hosting, and then thank you everybody in the live chat for watching. Tony, don't go anywhere just yet. And we will see all of you next week. So, bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.